Hello everyone, this is Cole Dobbins Spec with the Sprint 2 overview of the Radar project. So Sprint 2 has been completed. There's been a few things with this sprint. One of them was to split the server for management, so just a way to manage users and perform tasks on the server without using a client. That has been labeled as a won't fix, so I have closed that issue. The reason being is that I changed the way the server authenticates, so if the client connects from where the server is running, it automatically grants it authentication to perform those management tasks, and then I also improve the ability to manage the server from the client. In the sprint, there is also a large refactoring of code to move towards object-oriented design in Python. Before I was using a functional programming approach, but as I'm working towards the next sprint, I decided to move towards object-oriented design so that the new pieces of code can be integrated easier into the final product for that sprint. Another thing to note is that I did another task meant for Sprint 5, which is to implement encryption on the server API. So I did that, and initial testing was successful, so I rolled that out in Sprint 2 instead. This is the issue page on GitHub. Looking ahead at Sprint 3. So looking ahead at Sprint 3 there are two main tasks which are going to take a lot of time. There's the command processor engine is what I'm calling it, but it takes your command output and then parses it to get important information that can then be sent to the database and stored in a manner which is easier to retrieve. And then there's also the playbook engine, which is used to automate functionality. And that's what gives Radar its core part of the automating revolution. All right, so let's hop into the user-facing demo here. So there has been some changes. So if I run the client here, you'll see a help menu printed out. If I use the -H option, I can view a detailed help printout. So I did move the command to start a local instance of the Radar control server to a new command, and that was done so it would be cross-platform. But there's also the -S option to connect to a remote server. I'm currently running the server in a virtual machine because it's easier to do encryption on Linux systems from my experience. So I'm just going to connect to that here. So I've memorized the IP address, so you just put it in just like that. Alright, sorry about that. I needed to restart the Mongo database container just to clear all data that was in it, just so the demo would be nice and pretty. So I'm going to run this command here, and you can see new output compared to last sprint. So it tried to verify the connection to the encrypted API, but it encountered an SSL error. This is caused by me using a self-signed certificate that is not trusted on my machine. I've been working to fix this. It's just an issue of the specifications for these certificates being updated in a manner which is hard for me to create them in. So for the time being, I'm just going to say yes to trust the server regardless of the error, and then it's going to work perfectly fine from here on. So something with the sprint is there are now missions used to essentially categorize the data that's stored in the database. So that way, if there's multiple things happening that you're a part of, you can organize the commands and keep them separate. So the available missions default, so I can just say that I'm going to join that mission. Then if I run a command, it'll sync just like before. And a big part of the sprint was improving the built-in commands. So here's just a list of the Radar commands. I can get mission info, and I can also list the various collections in the database of my current mission. So this goes back to keeping it organized. So there's the raw commands collection. So I can read that here. It looks similar to sprint 1, where it's the output of the command. But then if I use the mission join command and I remove that capital N, I can join or create a new mission. So I'm just going to call it demo. It's going to say that it doesn't exist yet. It's going to ask me if I want to create it. I'm going to say yes. And then it creates that mission and then switches me over to it. So if I run the same collection read command, you'll see that there is no output because there's nothing stored in the database. So I can run another command here. Looks normal. I'm going to rerun the read command, and you can see it's outputting from the nmap command I just ran. And then I can join the default mission again, and when I read its contents, you can see it has the outputs from the first command I ran, and the output is being separated here. So that's just a way to organize the various commands that you might be running into various missions, just to keep things organized and make it easier. So that is the new user-facing interactions that are programmed in with this current sprint. As I said, a lot of it was working on the code. I'm going to hop to the server first. So this is the main change with the server. It is the encryption support. So in the configuration, it looks for the public key certificate, and then the private key, and then it loads that in to the Flask server and then runs, and then it serves the encrypted content. Flask handles that for me. I don't need to do much for that. In the case that those keys don't exist, it'll just run an unencrypted HTTP API instead. So in the client, a few things were changed over due to the refactoring that I mentioned earlier. So this is the connect to server method. And the way it works now is that it creates a server connection using the server connection object, which is a new thing that I'll get to in a bit. And then it opens the connection just to make sure that the client can communicate with the server. So this is pretty similar to before, but I removed all of the lines of code that used to be here and condensed them into just the 2 lines because of the refactoring. It then checks for the authorization, and if the client isn't authorized, it'll just wait for it to become authorized. So this is what you'd run into if you have multiple people connecting to the server, and whoever the team captain is, they just need to go through and authorize the clients. And once the clients are authorized, they'll automatically join the server and then receive a list of available missions, and then they can choose what mission they want to join. So as I hinted to, I refactored the code quite a bit to work with object-oriented design. So this is my objects.py folder, or module rather. So this is what a class looks like in Python. So the __init __ method is the constructor. So this is the system command object, and it's just used to store whatever command the user types in to execute, and then the output from that command. And it also stores helpful metadata, such as the time the command is executed and the time the command stops. So then you can see if there's like commands that'll take a long time, you can see exactly how long it took. This might be used in the future to do things such as notify the users if the network is being slow and they need to run commands at a slower rate. Otherwise, they're going to get incorrect results in their commands. And this happens when doing penetration testing and other network assessments. The network might try to kick the user off if they go too fast. So that can be helpful to prevent that. I pulled the run method from the utils module that I had it in before and put it in the object. So that's a method that it has. I also moved the code for handling the connection from the client to the server connection object. This is used to store information about the server that it's connected to, how it verifies the server for encryption, as well as what database it should be using. So this is all handled by the server connection object, and the functionality has been moved into this class. There's a lot of lines of code with this. This is definitely the biggest object that I've made for Radar. So a lot of it's similar to code that was in the project before, but was in the utils module. So now in the utils module, it's mostly just used to handle the execution of internal Radar commands. And it will get more functionality later on when I add more to it in later sprints as well. If you have any questions about the project, the best place to look is the GitHub. I've been trying to keep it up to date with a list of the issues that I'm working on and milestones that I'm trying to reach. So check that out if that's interesting to you, and I'll catch you on Sprint 3.